November 4th, 1922, the Valley of the Kings, Egypt. A water boy working on Howard Carter's excavation site noticed something in the sand, a step cut from the rock, leading down. Carter had been searching the valley for years. He had worked for the eccentric and wealthy Lord Carnarvon, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, a man who had turned to funding archaeology after a near-fatal motor accident left him too fragile for the English climate. They had found minor tombs, fragments, emptied chambers. The valley had given up most of its secrets decades earlier. Carnarvon had recently told Carter he was losing patience, that if they found nothing of significance this season, the funding would end. Carter's water boy found a step. By November 26th, they had cleared a staircase of 16 steps leading to a sealed door. Carter made a small hole in the door. He held up a candle. Hot air, 3,000 years old, rushed out past the flame, making it gutter, and then the candle steadied. Lord Carnarvon, standing behind him, could bear the suspense no longer. "Can you see anything?" he asked. Carter's answer became one of the most famous sentences in the history of archaeology. "Yes," he said. "Wonderful things. Inside, gold. Everywhere, the glint of gold. 5,000 objects that had not been touched in 3,200 years. Statues, furniture, weapons, games, clothes, chariots, and at the center of everything, the sealed burial chamber of the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun. 19 years old when he died. Cause of death still disputed. Forgotten so completely by history that his name had been deliberately erased from monuments by the rulers who came after him. Found again in 1922 by a man searching for something to justify his patron's faith. Carter sent Carnarvon a telegram. At last have made wonderful discovery in valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact, recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations." Carnarvon sailed to Egypt immediately. He would be dead in 5 months. Before I tell you about the deaths, I want to tell you what was actually in the tomb, because one of those 5,000 objects is the key to understanding what happened next, and almost no one talks about it. The tomb of Tutankhamun contained 5,398 objects. It took Howard Carter 10 years to catalogue and remove them all. Among them, a solid gold funerary mask weighing 11 kilograms that is now the most recognized object from the ancient world. Solid gold sandals, a golden throne, a dagger made from iron at a time when iron was rarer than gold because it had to come from meteorites. A boomerang, a board game, linen underwear. The linen was still folded, but there was something else in the tomb that the excavators did not report immediately. Something they found only gradually as they worked through the layers of 3 millennia of sealed air. The walls of the burial chamber were painted with black spots, irregular, scattered, not decorative, not part of the design. Something biological, something that had been growing in the dark on the warm painted walls for 3,000 years. It was mold. Specifically, it was a colony of Aspergillus flavus, a toxic fungal species capable of producing aflatoxins, one of the most potent natural carcinogens known. In a sealed space with no ventilation, undisturbed for millennia, the colony had grown and sporulated. When Carter broke through the sealed door and the air moved, the spores moved with it. Carter noted the black spots in his diary. He later said he was uncertain what they were. He did not raise the alarm. The excavation continued. There were also, according to a 2024 study published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, traces of uranium and radioactive decay products in the soil and rock of the surrounding area. The Valley of the Kings sits atop geological formations that, in certain places, concentrate naturally occurring radioactive material. The tomb was not a nuclear hazard, but prolonged time in an enclosed space above such formations is not nothing, particularly for someone with a compromised immune system. Lord Carnarvon had a compromised immune system. The car accident in 1903 had left him a semi-invalid. He suffered repeated lung infections. He was, in the assessment of his own physicians, a man whose body was not equipped to fight ordinary infections, let alone extraordinary ones. He entered the tomb on November 26, 1922. He crawled along the floor. He inhaled the air that had not moved since the reign of Rameses III. On March 6, 1923, he was bitten on the cheek by a mosquito. He nicked the bite while shaving. The wound became infected. He developed erysipelas, a streptococcal skin infection, which progressed to pneumonia. His organs began to fail. On April 5, 1923, Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo. He was 57 years old. At the moment of his death, according to multiple accounts, all the lights in Cairo went out simultaneously. In England, at the same hour, Carnarvon's favourite dog, a terrier named Susie, howled once and dropped dead. These are the facts as reported. The lights. There was a documented electrical failure in Cairo that night. Its timing was noted and filed. The dog. It was reported by Carnarvon's family. It cannot be verified or disproved. The legend was already writing itself. Carnarvon was the first. He was not the last. And what happened to the others, including the man who was found smothered in his room in a London gentleman's club, is the part of this story that the curse theory was invented to explain. Arthur Conan Doyle, who had by this point established himself as a committed believer in spiritualism, and who had, as regular listeners to this program will recall, also sent Agatha Christie's glove to a psychic medium, told the press that Carnarvon had been killed by elementals created by Tutankhamun's priests to guard the tomb. The newspaper coverage was immediate and enormous. A writer named Marie Corelli published a letter in the New York World claiming to quote an obscure book that warned of dire punishment for anyone disturbing a sealed Egyptian tomb. The book did not exist. The quote was fabricated. The newspapers ran it anyway. And then the deaths continued. George J. Gould, American financier, visitor to the tomb in 1923, developed a fever and died on the French Riviera in May 1923. He was 67. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who x-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, died in January 1924. He had skin cancer, the metastatic spread of which had been treated with abdominal surgery. He was 52. A.C. Mace, a member of Carter's excavation team, died in April 1928. He had suffered from pleurisy and pneumonia for years. He had also, according to Carter's diaries, been heavily exposed to the tomb's interior during the early months of excavation. The Honourable Mervyn Herbert, Carnarvon's half-brother, died in 1929 from what was reported as malarial pneumonia. And then there was Richard Bethell. Bethell was Lord Carnarvon's personal secretary. He had travelled with Carnarvon to the dig site. He was the second person to enter the tomb after Carter himself. In November 1929, Bethell's body was found in his room at an exclusive London gentleman's club. He had been smothered. His murder has never been solved. Shortly after Bethell's death, his father, Viscount Westbury, fell or jumped from a window of his London home. He was 78. A note found at the scene read, "I cannot stand any more horrors and hardly see what good I'm living for." The hearse carrying Westbury's body to the funeral hit and killed a boy in the street. Howard Carter, the man who had found the tomb, who had done the most work in the most direct contact with everything inside it, died in 1939. Of lymphoma, 17 years after the opening. He was 64. Lady Evelyn Herbert, Carnarvon's daughter, among the first to enter the tomb, lived until 1980. 58 years after the discovery. She was 78 when she died. A study examined the deaths of 58 people who were present at the opening of the tomb and sarcophagus. Of those 58, 8 died within a dozen years. The others were still alive. 8 out of 58, roughly 14%. For a group of people in their 40s, 50s and 60s in the 1920s and 1930s, before modern medicine, during a period of high mortality from infection, 14% dead within 12 years is not statistically unusual. But Bethell was smothered, in a locked room, in a London club. That is not a statistic, that is a fact, and it does not fit any of the natural explanations. Let me separate what we know from what has been constructed around what we know. First, there was no curse inscription in the tomb. This was a fabrication by journalists, and Marie Corelli's letter. Howard Carter stated this explicitly and repeatedly. He was a meticulous, skeptical man who found the curse narrative professionally embarrassing. The inscription, "Death shall come on swift wings to him that toucheth the tomb of Pharaoh," which appeared in many newspaper accounts, was never found. It does not exist. Second, the pattern of deaths is not statistically significant when examined properly. Of the people who were most directly and repeatedly exposed to the tomb's interior over a sustained period, Carter's core team, most lived to normal or above normal lifespans. Carter himself lived 17 years after first entering the tomb. The deaths that appear in the curse lists are often people who visited the tomb briefly, or who had pre-existing health conditions, or who died of causes entirely unconnected to Egypt. Third, Lord Carnarvon's death was almost certainly the result of the interaction between his weakened immune system and the infection he contracted. The mosquito bite was bad luck. The shaving nick was worse luck. The erysipelas for a man with Carnarvon's medical history was a death sentence that did not require a 3,000-year-old pharaoh to write it. So far, so ordinary. A famous discovery, a convenient death, a media cycle that needed a story, and Arthur Conan Doyle providing the supernatural explanation that made everything cohere. But Bethell, Richard Bethell, was smothered to death in a locked room. His murder was never solved. He had been the first person after Carter to enter the tomb. He had been Carnarvon's most trusted personal secretary, present at everything, privy to everything. What did Richard Bethell know? The excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb was not a simple archaeological exercise. It was conducted under a complex political arrangement between Carter and Carnarvon on one side and the Egyptian government on the other. The agreement gave Carter and Carnarvon first access and the right to publish. But all objects found in the tomb belonged to Egypt. Carter and Carnarvon did not always adhere strictly to this arrangement. Objects disappeared from the excavation and appeared later in private collections. Carter's own home contained items that, by rights, should have been in the Cairo Museum. This was known and quietly tolerated until it became politically inconvenient, at which point Carter was temporarily expelled from the site in 1924, and the Egyptian authorities took control. Bethell was the man who managed Carnarvon's affairs. He was the secretary. He kept the records. He knew which objects had gone where and what agreements had been made and what promises had been given. In 1929, 7 years after the opening of the tomb, at the moment when the political pressure around the excavation and its aftermath was at a peak, Bethell was found smothered in his room. The police investigated. No conclusion was reached. The case was closed. Richard Bethell's murderer has never been identified. 3 theories. One of them is the truth, or none of them are, or some combination that the evidence as it stands cannot yet resolve. This is where you come in. This is the first time I have done this. I have always presented you with the evidence and reached my own conclusion, or admitted that no conclusion was possible. But this case is different. This case has 3 theories that are each consistent with some of the evidence and inconsistent with some of the rest. And the answer, if there is one, may depend on which facts you weight most heavily. So tonight, I'm giving this to you. 3 theories, read them carefully, then leave your answer in the comments. Theory 1, Theory 2, or Theory 3. At the opening of the next episode, Inspector Morrow will read the results and explain which pieces of evidence support the most popular answer and which pieces it cannot explain. Theory 1. The biological explanation. Lord Carnarvon and the others who died quickly after the tomb's opening were killed by natural pathogens, toxic fungal spores, particularly Aspergillus flavus, that had grown in the sealed tomb for 3 millennia. The spores were released when the air moved. Those with compromised immune systems, Carnarvon chief among them, could not survive the exposure. The other deaths are coincidence, statistical noise, and the result of journalists and grief selectively assembling a pattern from ordinary mortality. Bethell's murder was unconnected to the tomb, a private crime with a private motive. Theory 2. The political explanation. There was no curse. There was, however, a cover-up. Carnarvon and Carter had removed objects from the tomb in violation of their agreement with the Egyptian government. Bethell knew which objects, where they went, and what had been promised and broken. Someone, connected to the political and financial interests around the excavation, silenced him before he could testify or be called to account. The other deaths were natural. Bethell's was not. The curse was a convenient and supernatural explanation that directed attention away from the possibility that a man had been murdered for what he knew. Theory 3. The accumulation. Theory. Both of the above are partially true, and the case cannot be resolved by choosing between them. The biological factor was real. The tomb contained pathogens that accelerated the deaths of vulnerable people. The political factor was also real. Bethell was murdered, and his murder had nothing to do with ancient spirits and everything to do with the very modern question of who controlled one of the most valuable archaeological discoveries in history. The curse was a myth. The deaths were not. Some were natural, one was not. And the full picture requires holding both explanations simultaneously without collapsing them into a single answer. Vote in the comments. Which theory do you believe? Write Theory 1, Theory 2, or Theory 3. Tell me which fact you find most convincing and which fact you cannot explain. The results will be discussed in the next episode. I will tell you where I stand. I find Theory 3 most honest, but I find Theory 2 most interesting. Because if Bethell was murdered for what he knew, and I believe he may have been, then the curse was not just a media fabrication. It was a useful one. It was a story that directed 3 generations of investigators toward the supernatural and away from the question of who killed a man in a locked room in 1929 and why. Supernatural explanations are always convenient for the people who need you not to look too carefully at the natural ones. Tutankhamun died at 19. He had been pharaoh since he was 9. He was forgotten so completely that his name was scratched from stone by the rulers who came after him, because he had tried to reverse the religious revolution of his father Akhenaten, and the priests who benefited from that reversal preferred history without him. He was remembered again in 1922, in gold, in a valley in Egypt, by a man who was running out of his patron's money. His patron died 5 months later. 3,000 years of sealed silence, and then this. Comment below. The next case begins with your answer. I am Inspector Morrow, and the file remains open, and for now, it is yours. If the darkness suits you, stay. Press subscribe. More cases, more questions, more nights with no clean answers.